If you're not already familiar with Kristi Coulter, she is the author of the new book called Nothing Good Can Come From This. She sits down with me today. We talk about the book. We talk about her story of addiction and recovery and what she's up to now. We also delve into some of the tools that she uses in her recovery, as well as what she knows for sure. You are not going to want to miss this conversation with Kristi Coulter.
Here, we want to show you what's possible in the world of sobriety. We introduce you to the various tools, programs, and resources available, because there are way more options than you may even realize. We want you to find the one that works for you.
And we do it through people. People who share their pathway to recovery and will help you find your path to freedom. Because getting sober can feel hard enough. You don't have to do it alone. I'm Sarah Roberts.
And I'm Roger DeVoe, and this is Sobriety Starts Here.
Kristi Coulter, I have been looking forward to this conversation for weeks and weeks. I am so happy to have you with me. Thank you for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to it too.
Yay! Oh my gosh. Well, Kristi is the author of Nothing Good Can Come From This. And we are really going to be diving deep into the book and why you wrote it and who you wrote it for. And then you're going to allow us to kind of get right inside your story. And you're going to share with us sort of how you were raised and all the way up and through. And that'll bring us full circle to where you are today. So I would like to know, why did you decide to go ahead and write a memoir? And who really did you write it for?
Oh, that's a good question. So I had started writing some essays really coming out of my blog about being sober and getting sober. And the woman who is now my editor, who's been a friend for many years, emailed me in the middle of reading one of them and said, this could be a book. We need to talk about this. And I was like, oh, whatever, sure. Sure, let's have coffee. And she said, this could actually change lives. And I got very nervous about that, honestly, partly because I consider myself sort of a writer first and a sober person second. And I didn't want to write a self-help book. I'm happy to help people, but I didn't want the book to be a book that said, you should do this or you should do that. As a writer, I'm kind of a narcissist. I just wanted to write about my own experience.
Yeah.
And, but I started thinking about what she said. And I was like, yeah, let's talk about this. So we started developing it. And then I wrote Anjali as probably the second or third piece. And I was feeling kind of invisible in the world as a writer. And I slapped it up on Medium. And, it like globally viral.
It went crazy to the point where my boyfriend, who, yes, he's sober, but he does not live in our world.
Right.
He sent it to me and I was like, I've already read this. How are you seeing this? And he's like, 2 or 3 people sent it to me. And I'm like, people are sending it to you? They don't even know you're sober. Like, what is happening? That was incredible.
Madness. I mean, I think I went from total obscurity to being on like Radio Scotland in literally 4 days. Wow. It was surreal. And at that point, we both were like, okay, there's a book in this. We should do this. And I think within a couple of weeks, I had a book deal. And I wrote it partly because I thought, okay, I found a topic. Like clearly I found a topic with a lot of angles to explore, but also because I wanted to write a story that focused just as much on sobriety as on the drinking part. There's a lot of memoirs out there about people drinking. And then often at the end, it's like, and then I had a moment of clarity. And now and I was like, well, but what then? What then? And Sarah Hepelis with Blackout does some of this. She spends a lot of time on the sober part. And I thought, sobriety is fascinating. In good and bad ways, it's not fascinating. It's not always great. So I really wanted to focus on that and give people a picture of what it could be like. Mm-hmm. And I also wanted to give them a picture that's very just my picture. I think it's so easy with sobriety writing to everyone slide into the same language or the same experience. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to be very much myself. I didn't want to try to make myself like falsely likable or falsely relatable. I didn't want to try to be every woman. I just wanted to be me.
Yeah.
So
you
I wrote
say that a lot. Do you spend some time on social media talking about, if you guys think I'm trying to be likable, like that's
right.
the last thing I'm trying to do. Love
And
that.
it's funny because I do in real life, of course, like anybody, I'm desperate to be liked. But well, one thing I found with Anjali is that I got pushback from readers who said, "Oh, how am I supposed to relate to you? You have a well-paying job, you're white, you're affluent, and or they would say, why are you claiming to represent all women?" And I was like, whoa, babe, I'm not claiming to represent all women. I am. When I wrote it, I had a couple different routes I could have gone. I could have tried to make myself more of an every woman. But that's not true to me as a writer or person.
Right. And maybe
so
we should tell people, for people that are watching right now that have never read Anjali, and it is one of the chapters in your book, and I love the way you've written your book, that it's not chronological. You go to this direction. Like I savored it so much. I read it over probably a week or two, because I would just read a chapter and then I just sort of let that marinate and sink in a little bit. And then a few days
to read that way.
I just really enjoyed it that way. But maybe we should share with people watching, if they haven't read Anjali, because you can find Anjali like on Medium, and you can find it other places, so they can read that to get a taste of your work. Tell us a little bit of the premise behind it.
Yeah, so the premise behind Anjali and the title itself, I think you have to be probably a woman of a certain, or a person of a certain age. But when I was growing up in the US in the late 70s, it's a perfume. I think they still make it. It's like the kind you buy in a drugstore. And there was this woman she would sing a song that was, I can bring home the bacon, fry it up in a pan, and never let him forget he's a man. And it was for the 24-hour woman. And I started thinking, when I first got sober, I was looking at the women around me and the women in my like urban, affluent culture, all drinking a lot. And I started to connect drinking as being like the only form of coping or self-care that some of us had, living in this very male world. Yes. And I started thinking about the Anjali woman out of the blue. And I was like, this is all her fault. Why do we have to be, it's not enough to just be professionally successful or a great, homemaker or really beautiful. Like we have to do everything. All of it, or we're doing something wrong. And I started to realize there's no correct way to be a woman. And I started just for everything I've noticed around me, because when you get sober, you step out of one culture and kind of into a no man's land, and you're looking back at it.
Oh, well said. So well said. Yes.
If you've ever lived in a foreign, like I lived in Italy for a year, and I'd never seen America so clearly. I think it's anytime you leave your place, your land, you're just like, oh. And so it all became very clear to me. And so I wrote Anjali as a way to kind of capture that and to kind of make like a feminist rallying cry. Not that no woman should ever, who could handle having a glass of wine shouldn't have it, fine, that's fine with me, but that we shouldn't be using alcohol. I think I said to, getting a little thing, this is my internet connection. No, it's fine. That we shouldn't be using alcohol to make our lives tolerable. Our lives need to be tolerable without a drug. So that's kind of why I wrote it. And it was very controversial. It's much more controversial than I would have expected. Mm-hmm. I expected men to be like, you suck, you're a woman, you talked on the internet, I don't like you. Okay, I don't like you either. Go back to your basement. But there were definitely women who felt judged, almost as though I personally kind of reached out and been like, hey, Debbie, put down that margarita. Yes. And they were very like, they didn't like me either. So I got very used to the idea of not being liked. Mm-hmm. It was like a crash course in realizing you can have a lot of people really, really angry at you, and it's fine. You survive. But that's why to this day, and it also made my name, by the way. So that's why I'm very big on, like, as a writer, if I'm trying to be liked, I'm going to fail.
Isn't it almost like, what a great metaphor for being a human being? If we're all going around trying to be liked, that is not the greatest way to be a human.
No, it doesn't work. You have to be, I try to be a decent, kind person. Yeah. And it's not like we'll just go ahead and go around and be a jackass. No. But I figured that way, because I want to have, a long writing career, and it won't I don't know what my next topic will be. It won't all be about sobriety. And I thought, well, this is not, I don't want to be a paragon for humanity. There were people who said, oh, you're my spiritual guide. And that really scares me because no, you don't want me, babe. You know, I can be your friend, but it's not a good scene always around here. So yeah, so I'm very careful about that, like that I'm not a role model, that I'm not, but I can be someone who's been a little further down the path and say, this is what it's like for me. And
and is that who you wrote Nothing Good Can Come From This for the person who is kind of going down the path, someone that either has gotten sober or is looking to get sober or is just curious about what that life looks like?
Yeah, I think it's like when I read memoirs, often I just want to know, like, what's it like to do something I haven't done? Or what's it like to be in a life? I mean, I tell people, like, I cut the one thing out of my life that I really thought I couldn't live without.
Yes.
And what happened next? I think everybody has something. It could be a sport. It could be a person. It could be something healthy or unhealthy.
Could be a cell phone.
Could be a cell phone. Yeah. Could be, coffee.
Yep.
And like, what happens when you take that thing? It could be a religion. I mean, my God, it could be anything.
Yes.
And I basically took away the one coping mechanism I had and had to rebuild my life. And so I think that pretty much everyone's got something they could relate to that. But yeah, especially I was thinking of women, and I was thinking women who were like, I feel a little weird about my drinking sometimes, not just women who know they have a problem, but just to give them that glimpse of like, well, here's what you might encounter, the good and the bad. And here's why, for me, it was worth it.
I think it's so amazing because, we're starting to hear more from more and more, especially women in the recovery community that are labeling themselves gray area drinkers. These people that don't have to hit this unbelievable rock bottom where they've lost everything, their marriage has collapsed, they are living on the street, or it doesn't have to get like that. And I really felt it from your story. It's very relatable to so many of us because your drinking certainly didn't seem to be even as bad as my own drinking. And I thought my own drinking was, pretty gray area, but also kind of getting up there. Like, it was just so relatable because it was like, this is a woman who's just made this choice because she knows she needs to for her. And you had people in your own community saying, really? Like, what do you mean? Like, we all drink like this, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I drank basically a bottle of wine a day, for 10 years or something. And I used a lot of that. I never liked drinking during the daytime. I wasn't drinking in the morning. So I told myself these sort of lies, but it was the one thing I was most terrified to take away. So I'm like, okay, that counts as addiction. Yes. But I have a friend, actually, I was walking around the lake with him recently. He's also a writer, and he was a fentanyl addict. And so he looked at me and he was like, I think of you as sort of like, one of those lipstick addicts, like they used to say lipstick lesbian. Yeah. I just cracked up because I was like, I could totally see how you would think that, because like you had a needle in your arm and you were like on a sidewalk somewhere, and I was like drinking nice white wine. But it's funny, even concepts of addiction. And, I know Holly at Hip Sobriety she's like, you don't have to call yourself an alcoholic. I mean, I use the word now because it's a common word that people get it. Like if you say I'm an alcoholic, they know what you mean. Yeah. But I don't necessarily think you need to think of yourself that way to do something about your drinking. It's whatever works for you.
Oh, I feel that too. It's funny. Holly really gave, was sort of that first voice to say, yeah, God, like you don't have to use this label anymore. And right. I've said this before in other conversations. I was traveling last Christmas with some family, and I'm watching everyone get completely annihilated, and I'm the alcoholic. Like, right. It's kind of like, what? That doesn't
exactly feel... like I'm not even drinking.
I'm having a cappuccino. And I'm the alcoholic, and you guys are all falling down and acting stupid and saying terrible things, and I'm having to take care of, this and that. It's like, oh my gosh, we really need to own it. And I think that's what's important. And for me, I needed to own it by owning the label early on when I got sober, especially when I came out as an alcoholic. It felt empowering. It felt like it felt a bit like a fuck you. It felt like when people would bug me, not even just one, like, you're not, come on, like, can't you just, and I was like, I'm an alcoholic. Okay. Like,
it shuts them up. Yeah.
It is a really fast shut up. Yeah. So for me, it felt empowering in that way. And then slowly across time, I've changed it to more saying, I'm sober, I just don't drink or whatever. Yeah. But I think that the comment here is just we get to define it however we want to. And you have chosen to write a book about your experience, not in a way that you are necessarily telling everybody else that this is a recipe for how to do it, but this is how you did it. And it really worked well for you. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Have you ever relapsed?
I have not.
I didn't think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I really did have sort of a moment, you know, when I finally quit, it really was this moment where I was just like, okay, this obviously doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I've had moments where I've thought, oh, wow. For a minute, I think I wish I still drank. But then I'm like, why? You know, that's the one, whatever moment I'm in right then where I have a problem, I think that's the one way you could guarantee yourself this problem would be worse.
So true. And yet in that moment, I'm 16 years since starting my journey. So for me, it's very few and far between that I have that craving or that feeling. Yeah. And usually it's just the feeling of wanting to escape whatever it is that I'm dealing with. Like it's not really wanting to drink. It's just not wanting to feel this pain or this anger or this frustration. But yeah, it's just that feeling like, oh my gosh, you want to escape, but it's the one thing that's going to make everything worse.
Yeah. And you can't escape. I mean, there's a chapter in the book where I talk about election night in the US when Trump was elected. And
it was so good. It literally just gave me goosebumps. When I read that chapter, I'm not American, as you know, but I was following and I was also jaw dropped and what the fuck is happening? And the way you go through like sort of this hour and this time, and you're documenting the time and what you're thinking and doing. Oh, it was incredible.
Well, at the end, I did realize, I thought, you could drink, but it's not going to change reality. It'll just mean that he's still president and you have a hangover and you've relapsed. And I was like, oh. And then I was mad. I was like, well, that's not fair. And it's like, I don't said anything about fair. This is about you. And I've got friends who are like, that man's not going to drive me back to the bottle. Like, fuck him. So
to anybody that's watching that, that voted for Trump, fair enough. But I understand that feeling for the people that did not want him in, and that feeling of almost like hopelessness, like what's going to happen, to our country and what's going on and who is in our country, like what is happening, like
who are these people,
like what we, and it's funny how us here in Canada, we often will say we didn't vote for him, and I'm like, we don't even live there, but
right.
But it feels that way. But that feeling of, oh my gosh, it just felt so overwhelming and daunting, and then it's still, on the day-to-day basis, many people share that their drinking really has escalated since that time.
I was very lucky because even women I know who are sober say, I've had women say I haven't been able to exercise, I can't get anything done. And I somehow went into it. It kind of awakened this thing in me. And it was partly not just his victory, but who lost. I thought, this woman I was a Hillary my whole life. I did always the girl who wanted to do the extra credit work. I did the homework. I knew everything. I tried hard. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I had a real fuck it moment. I thought, if she can lose like this. And now, of course, we know there were all kinds of weird forces in play that we may never fully understand. And she did win the popular vote by quite a bit. But I thought, I'm not going to follow rules that I don't want to follow anymore. And in a way, the election of Donald Trump kind of freed me up and gave me some momentum to just be the person I wanted to be. So I went into that year, I had my book to write. I was training for a half marathon. I mean, I just thought, let's just do this. You're not going to let this person or this government slow you down. Now, I'm also very protected in some ways, but I'm really lucky. Like I'm among the last people they will come for, and I'll be gone by then. But and I'm exaggerating because I think we're going to get through. But yeah, I was just like, I'm going to live how I want now, and I'm not going to be the good girl anymore.
Man, what a beautiful blessing that comes in even the darkest of places, right? You never know where that's going to come. So kudos to you for seeing that lightness in that place. What I want to do now, and I know you do go into it in some detail in the book, and I'm going to ask you a little bit more about it, and by the way, your book is amazing. I know I said it, but I think I was kind of cutting you off at the same time. Your book is amazing. It's beautifully written. It is so well done. I am so grateful that you sent me an advance copy to give me a chance to have a read. It's every single chapter. Like I said, it's decadent. Like you just can't wait to get into it. And then it's nice to savor it. It's It's really beautifully written. You are
Thank
extremely articulate. You're a woman that I was saying before we started recording.
you.
Sometimes I am intimidated by you. I read some of the stuff that you write, and sometimes I'm like, I gotta look up that word, and then you'll tell me, you'll write something on social media about the music that you're listening to, and I'm like, I have never heard of that band before. These movies, you're like my favorite movies, and like they are not the blockbusters that I'm used to.
No, not usually.
Not usually at all. And what I love so much about you is how interesting and mysterious and sexy and sensual and just how I don't know, you're just this complete amazing package that's just so interesting. And I love that you created this real identity. And I feel like maybe what I admire so much is that I certainly did not create an identity for myself. I was always trying to just figure out other people's identity to adopt. And whoever I was following at the time, I would like whatever they liked at the time. And it really has taken me a long time. It's only happened truly in recovery, where I have carved out a real path for me that is authentic to me. And so I greatly admire you, that you really worked on your persona and your identity for a long time. And I wonder how much of that comes from your roots and how you were raised. And so I'd love for you to share with people watching how you were raised, how you were, where you were born, and how all that, your childhood went. And then let's, go all the way through a little bit without, sort of stealing anything from the book. Definitely people have to get into that, but then that'll kind of bring us full circle. So go wherever you want to start.
Yeah, so I am from a family that's actually been in America since I think about the Mayflower. It's a very, I'm actually descended from the youngest signer of the Declaration of Independence, who was a man who lived in Charleston. In fact, I went to Charleston, South Carolina a few years ago, which is such a great town, by the way. And there were statues of him, like Edward Rutledge, everything was named after him. And so old Deep South family, deep, deep, deep South. And I lived in the Deep South myself. I was born in on the border between Georgia and Alabama for a couple of years, and then lived in Atlanta. And then I was raised mostly in South Florida, about an hour north of Miami. My dad is an academic. He was a professor, and he retired as a dean of engineering. My mom was mostly a homemaker. She was also for a while the top Clinique salesperson in a tri-county area. My mother was really good at selling makeup, which is a skill. Oh, yeah. Quite a skill. And I was raised in a town called Boca Raton, which when we moved there was very sleepy, like about 30,000 people. And by the time I left at 18 was, I don't know, probably 200,000, and just full of like very, very new money, and really kind of garish, and just not me. It just wasn't what I was comfortable with at all. And so I think a lot of my identity came from feeling like I was in this, I was kind of placeless. Like I didn't feel like I belonged there. I always tell people.
Can I ask how did you decide that you didn't feel like you belonged, considering that's sort of where you were raised, and that formative years there? Like how did you feel like that place wasn't right?
It's kind of strange. Like part of it, I think, is, I came from a very solidly middle-class family. Even people would call us upper middle class, but there was so much money pouring in that it was a place where kids they wouldn't inherit a parent's old car. They would get a brand new Mercedes on their 16th birthday. That was not us. We went to Disney World and, this stuff like that. I had ballet classes, but there was a ton of very flashy money. And, especially coming from the Deep South, it's kind of like New Englanders. Like if you have money, you don't want anyone to know it. So that was part of it, just this very conspicuous consumption that frankly, my family just couldn't keep up with. And part of it was also just, I've always, and I don't know if I can explain this, but I've longed for places with a sense of history, where buildings have some years behind them. In Florida, there's some beautiful old parts of Florida, but everything was 20 years old and short, because it's going to get knocked down in hurricanes otherwise. Yes. And it all just felt so new. And a lot of the kids I grew up with were also transplants from the Northeast, from like the New York area, New Jersey especially. So they all kind of brought their own culture down with them, and I didn't understand it. I was also very introverted, a little shy, very bookish. And I don't think that the world's ever particularly kind to kids like that, especially girls. So I was kind of a normal, I'd say average happy kid through elementary school. I was in this gifted program 6 hours a day, and I had my own crowd. And it was really when I hit, middle school. I mean, is anyone happy in middle school? I don't know. I was not.
Oh man, middle school or high school, whenever they said, high school, the best years of your life, I was like, shoot now then, because
exactly. Like I would have jumped in front of a bus, I mean, things were just not working. We're not going well for Kristi. I mean, I wish I could show you photos in middle school. And so it was really when I got into high school and I started to, and South Florida is a fairly urban, populous area. I started to be like, okay, well, everybody hates me. So I have like 5 friends. How can I find some people who get me? And I started looking around, in other parts of Palm Beach County and Dade County. And I kind of got into the punk scene and the indie music scene, which is thriving down there. And that's where I found my acceptance. It was, the late 80s, and I've always loved music. And so I became like the sort of indie rock girl. And suddenly I was popular, boys wanted to go out with me, girls wanted to go out with me, people wanted to be my friend, and people read books. And that's just kind of, I just fell into that, and it saved me, honestly. And that's how I got through high school. I mean, I think I probably had 3 or 4 friends in my high school. I look back and I think, it was also partly me. I probably could have maybe put a little effort into it, but I just had my eye on, I'm going to get out of here and I'm going to go. Then I went to a school in Florida for undergrad it was 500 students at the time. It's public, but run kind of like Oxford, like on the tutorial system, very brainy. And it was like meeting 500 me's. For better or worse.
Fair enough.
Again, there's something to be said for some diversity in population. And that's just kind of, I've just always liked that path not taken. I like the things that, I'm much more basic than I used to be. Like I used to be the kind of kid who thought, well, something's popular, it must be terrible. And I just decide for myself as an adult, what I like and what I don't. But yeah, I ended up, after undergrad, I moved to Michigan to go to grad school to get my creative writing master's. And then I ended up working for this huge database of music and movie data called the All Music Guide, which was directly like related to how I spent my teenage years. And so I kind of just channeled myself into this world where, having deep opinions about like the first REM album was actually like a job skill,
Yes.
And that's just kind of, and now I live in Seattle where that's sort of how we live. And so I just stayed that way.
So I'm curious then, looking back to sort of middle school, then high school, what was your first foray into, what was your first experience with either drugs or alcohol?
Yeah. So interestingly, I don't think I ever had a drink other than like maybe a sip of champagne on New Year's Eve till I was 16. And I think it was a wine cooler or Boone's Farm Strawberry Hill wine, which is, I don't know if you have that in Canada, but it's like, think of the worst thing possible. And it was at a party. I remember it was at a jacuzzi party, which that's just a thing in Florida. And I just remember feeling, probably looking back, I should have been like, ooh, this feels too good. I just felt like, oh, I'm suddenly social and people can talk to me. This is why I think that it's partly, my unpopularity was partly my fault because I was just too shy to talk and it loosened me up. And I started drinking pretty regularly then. I, through high school, would drink at clubs. I was going to clubs where I was showing my social security card to get in, because I was 17, not 21, or gay bars where they were just like, come on in, honey, it's fine. And
did you look older for your age, or do you think?
No, I looked young for my age at the time. They just, they wanted the money, or they were just like, fine. I had a lot of older gay male friends who kind of adopted me as a niece, and that's actually a safe place for a young girl to drink. There's no predators, or they're not preying on you anyway. And so I mostly drank and smoked in high school. I think I smoked pot once or twice, and it freaked me out. My drug history, in college, I dropped acid a couple of times. I did some ecstasy, but the interesting thing is I always felt like alcohol was controllable.
Oh my God, you are speaking my language. I dropped acid once. I smoked pot here and there, nothing major. But for me, it was booze was what, it just called my name. Everything just softened. It felt right. All of a sudden I was the full expression of who I thought I was.
Right.
It was everything I needed. Yeah.
It feels sophisticated. My friends would drop acid and they'd all do a whole tab and I'd be too afraid. So I'd do a half tab and I would just feel, they'd have a great time and I would just feel speedy and irritable, you know, so because I was afraid of hallucinating. But with booze, I just thought, oh, this is really chic and I feel like a grown up and you can go to dinner and have it. And it is controllable if you can control it. I mean, which I clearly could not. So yeah, I think that really it was about, for me, booze was about being able to talk to people, feeling like a grown up, feeling sophisticated, and definitely being able to talk to boys.
Why do you think you were such a shy kid?
I think I was very thoughtful. I liked to live in my own head a lot. I was a writer from very early on. I was always thinking, how do I turn this into some sort of narrative? How do I turn this into a story? There was nothing particularly, like from the outside, I was kind of a regular kid, aside from being, you know, academically advanced. You know, I did a lot of the stuff other kids did, played tag and watched TV and everything. I think it's just my temperament, and I was easily overstimulated by having too much noise around me, you know, too much activity. So I liked being alone. And yeah, and it really didn't set in until middle school. And I think that's also when I became, you know, like very awkward. And I can definitely tell you that was when the line is drawn between cool kids and not cool kids. Yeah. And I was definitely on the not cool side. And I had boys be really mean to me and talk about, I mean, they would talk about how ugly I was. I wasn't ugly. I mean, I looked fine, you know, I had a bad perm and some weird clothes, you know, but it was that kind of thing where it was like, oh, she's really, really, really unattractive. They would call me a dog. And that really got under my skin, you know, and you do not shed that stuff. Really.
Oh, you do not shed that stuff. Gosh, I had some name calling done to me, nothing major, but that stuck with me for years and years. There's a part in your book that stopped me in my tracks and I loved it. And it was one line at the end of a chapter. And it was, what stopped me was that you hadn't really talked about worrying. You'd talked a little bit about your looks. You had talked a bit about not feeling, you know, sexy or beautiful, I think at some point or whatever, but you'd never really talked about weight or that you'd felt overweight or anything. And you, in the chapter, Pussy Tripped It, at the very last line, P.S. and stop calling yourself fat. You're not. Jesus Christ. Yeah. And I read that and I laughed out loud and it resonated so strongly because Jesus Christ, we go around saying that we're fat. God, I'm guilty of it. I'm like, oh, you know, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
We're not fat. This is ridiculous. This society is telling us this crazy lie that we've all bought into, and we all think we need to go to your mom and buy every Clinique product and to look our best and to go on every diet and to do every single thing that we need to do to look at this certain way for men, you know, hence and Jolie, you know, like it's just, it's so crazy. And so I love that line so much because it was like, oh my God. And I wanted to ask you about that line. Are you truly at a point where you do not feel fat and you are comfortable in your own skin and you feel really good about who you are?
I don't know. I mean, it depends on the day. I would say I have probably felt fat for like 90% of my life at whatever weight I was at. And constantly. And it's so funny. I've been in therapy for years, and it was about 8 years into therapy that this came up, and I thought, and she said, why'd you never mention it? And I thought, I didn't think of it as an issue. I just thought, well, of course I feel fat. Like, that's just this is how people feel. Yeah. And she was like, oh, that's interesting. We should come back to that. I would say I feel fairly comfortable. I've had an interesting experience because when I went from being like the ugly duckling to when I was about 17, it was like a switch flipped. And suddenly I was getting an enormous amount of attention from men in a way that really freaked me out. You know, I was absolutely not ready for. And I'd say I've lived more on that side of the line in my adult life as like a relatively conventionally attractive person, you know, and it gives you certain privileges and certain powers. It also kind of, you know, makes midlife an interesting time because suddenly you're like, oh, is it all going to get stripped away from me? Am I going to become invisible? I don't think so. I think you become invisible when you decide you're invisible. So I feel in a lot of ways like I've never been sexier, I've never been more attractive. But yeah, I have the same I mean, I have the same hangups as any woman, probably more because I had experienced that intensity of attraction, of not attraction, but attention, and you become aware of what you can use it for. I will say I've always thought I was lucky that I was never so conventionally attractive that I didn't have to develop myself in other ways.
Brilliantly said. Brilliantly said. And I know that that seems unfair to the, you know, stereotypically gorgeous woman out there that just kind of gets at that. Then they, you know, that they don't feel like they have to necessarily develop themselves because they've got all of these privileges like you talked about. But yes, I feel that I love what you're saying. Keep going with that. Sorry, I thought I had a point and I really don't.
I've always admired Kristi Turlington in that way because she, to me, is probably one of the 2 or 3 most beautiful women on earth. And she went back and got her degree and she does all this stuff. And I mean, here's someone who could have just coasted till the age of 90, you know, and she's just so, I'm just like, you're so cool that you did that. But, you know, so I always had, I think it's, trying to think where I was going with this, but yeah, I mean, I do at this point feel like, okay, it's a face, it's fine. I grew into it. I know how to groom myself, you know. I think most beauty is just grooming, honestly, and charisma. And I, yeah, like I wouldn't want to be in my 30s anymore. I feel like I look better in my late 40s than I did in my 30s, because I'm healthier and I actually know how to, you know, I have to like think about it a little bit now. So I know how to like take care of myself. It's
funny because you say late 40s, and I think that anyone watching right now would be like, what? Late 40s?
Well, I'm well preserved. Yeah, I'm 48.
Isn't that amazing? And this is being recorded on July, what date are we? July 9th of 2018. So well done, girl. I mean, you're definitely taking care of business. And hey, talk about a benefit of sobriety. I mean, don't you feel like you look 10 years younger now than you did in the height of your active addiction?
I do. And it's interesting because I can't quite figure out why sometimes, you know, I mean, I weigh a little bit less, but not much. I don't actually know what it is, but there's something about, because I never had like that addiction ravaged face, like just genetically, like my skin always looked pretty good, but something has changed. Like my eyes are clearer. Yeah, I think when you're not filled with shame, you just are probably prettier. It's very
beautiful way to put that. When you're not filled with shame, we look.
Yeah.
That's
and I think you could be an addict and not be filled with shame. I mean, I would love to see people struggle and not be filled with shame.
Yeah.
But for me, it took getting sober.
Yeah.
I had to put it behind me.
Yeah.
I also think it's funny, growing up in Florida, I'm very lucky to look relatively young because, you know, I think that's where being a bookworm and then a goth saved me, because I was inside all the time. You know,
never seeing the light of day.
Yeah. I wasn't covered in baby oil, you know, not too much.
So you've taken us now you're in grad school, and is your drinking progressing after you started at 16? And then are you noticing a progression, or can you look back and see a progression?
It was a subtle progression. I think in grad school, the main thing for me was that when I did drink, I never knew when to stop. So it wasn't that I was drinking every night. But it was, especially if I was out with my fellow students or friends, it was just hard to know when to stop. And I think it's hard in college and grad school to some extent because everybody drinks a lot. It's, you know, I've heard someone say like, it's hard to tell the alcoholics from the just kids in college because you almost have to wait a couple of years unless you're doing wildly self-destructive things, which I wasn't. I think that in my 20s, here's what I remember. I remember reading Carolyn Knapp's book, Drinking a Love Story.
That was the first memoir I ever read, a drinking memoir.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a lot of us, and I was probably 26 or 27, and I was like, oh fuck, I'm in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Because she said things like watching the level of the bottle go down and feeling impatient that other people weren't drinking fast enough. And I probably was having, I don't know, 2 glasses of wine a day at most then. And I was like, oh, this is not good. You feel the same way she does, even at that level.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I just was like, well, I'm not going to think about it. So, but I read the book several times.
Wow.
And
even at just 2 glasses of wine a day, what made you, was it the amount? Was 2 glasses to you a lot, or was it the feeling attached to?
It was the feeling.
Yeah.
It was the way she talked about always monitoring how much wine was in the house. I mean, like we lived in the Midwest then, and if a big snowstorm was coming, my first thought was not, is there milk and bread in the house, but is there wine?
Right.
Um,
What made you go and buy her book in the first place?
I think I probably just saw it in the bookstore, and the fact that I probably read about it. I think the fact that it was about addiction, something in me knew that I wanted to read the story about a woman who, all the marketing was like, she's a woman like a lot of women. This is not the Skid Row story. And that made me curious. I wanted to know what that was like. And I think I wanted to find out that she was much, much worse than I was. And I think she was drinking a lot more, but I found, oh, this is worrisome. And it was just beautifully written too.
And she was a writer, and you're yeah. It
was a literary book. It was a beautifully written book. And it really scared me. But I think my drinking didn't amp up. It started to ramp up in a cliched way after 9/11,
yes,
which is kind of crazy because I lived nowhere near where anything happened, but it just kind of, this feeling of suddenly like there's anthrax. I mean, all the stuff that happened afterwards, there's anthrax in the mail, and we didn't know what was going on, and were we going to war? I mean, it really kind of pulled the rug out from under me in a strange way for someone with no direct connection at all.
Yeah. And I don't think you were alone in that. I think that's something that's a pretty common situation for a lot of people that experienced 9/11 in the way that they experienced it either on TV or in New York or just anywhere around the country. And even here in Canada, just such it just shook us. It was,
it changed the world, and it could have changed the US for the better, and it did not. It seemed like it was going to for a week or so there. But so that was fairly shocking. And I started drinking pretty much every day at that point.
Okay.
And then that amped up more and more. And then when I moved to Seattle, and I worked for Amazon for 12 years, which is a really long time to work for Amazon. I think the median tenure is like less than 2 years. And that's when I started to drink more and more and more. I think just because, I stayed for 12 years for a reason. It was really good to me, but it's tough. Working in tech is tough. And I had big jobs, huge responsibilities, and I wanted to be perfect at everything. And so I can't really say Amazon drove me to drink, but Amazon's demand for perfection and my own demand for perfection merged to create, an increase.
It was like you enabled one another.
Yes. I mean, it kind of feeds on people feeling not quite good enough. Yes. And
like some of the stuff you said that happened you never use the name Amazon in your book, I noticed, which is understandable, but I knew that you would work there, and so I knew it was Amazon. It was just like some of the things that you were saying people would say to you on a daily, calling you stupid, and you're the stupidest fucking person, and what? I mean, I just can't imagine being treated that way. And that to you was a Tuesday. It was like, whatever. And
it's crazy. And it's kind of like, some of the best people I've ever met are there, and some of my dearest friends. And so it's like the day-to-day culture, can be very warm, and it really depends on which part of the company you're in. I had some wonderful experiences, but there is this sort of brutality and a very male way of, I don't think this is good for men either, but it's like a very toxic masculinity way of working. Very, kind of hierarchical, and we're going to fight and confront each other. And it's exhausting, and there's never much of a thank you. I mean, the thank you is that they pay you a ton of money. And that is a nice thank you, but it's kind of like, okay, well, what have you done for me since that last great thing you did? And so for someone like me who was primed for that, it's just vicious. It just makes you like, okay, well, I'm never going to be good enough. And the best people who worked for me were always the ones who were sure that I was about to fire them, and even though you're like, I would never, you're extraordinary. And I was that kind of person, always sure that I was about to get fired, even though I was doing a great job. That's just kind of in me, and it was always in me, but Amazon definitely brought it out. And 12 years, you internalize a lot of that stuff.
You internalize a lot. And I imagine that the culture there, it was such a drinking culture. I imagine that it still is. Like you talked about that a bit in the book. Like it was just, that is what you did there. You drank, there was even day drinking at the office. Like it was everywhere.
That's how people would relax. I mean, I knew people who would keep a little fridge at their desk, and at 6 they'd stop, have a couple beers, and then go back to work for 2 or 3 hours. I wasn't doing that, but there's lots of drinking. And one of my later, at the worst of my drinking, I was not only working for Amazon and in tech, because it's not just drinking is a tech thing, but I was working in publishing at Amazon. Publishing is a really boozy business because it's very social. There's lots of dinners. Authors often have substance issues. So it was really like the worst of all possible worlds for someone who is already a problem drinker, to get sucked into that. So yeah, the fact that the workplace culture, drinking was what people did to relax and to feel good about themselves and to bond, really didn't help me at all.
No,
Yeah.
for sure. So you ended up quitting drinking while working at Amazon.
Yep.
So can you share sort of the, not the rock bottom moment, but the moment where you did decide, okay, that's it for me?
Yeah, I'd had a really bad spring, and I was doing a lot of international traveling at that time and for work. And I've had moments in both New York and London, two of my favorite cities, where I would find myself in like a 4-star hotel room, should be living high on the hog, in like this total terror panic, drunk, afraid to go to sleep, afraid to wake up, just really existential terror. And I just knew something was going to have to change. And I'd had a few stretches where I'd go a couple days sober. I've been trying to moderate for years, 2 days off, 1 day on, and all that stuff. Oh God, moderation.
The rules we create around it. I have all sorts of rules too. Yeah.
It's so much trouble to moderate. It's too hard for me.
Yeah, me too.
So I am finally in about late June, because I just passed my 5th anniversary. I just woke up one day, and it was just another day where I woke up and I had a headache, and my husband was out of town all week. He was going to be gone on a business trip. And I just thought, you know what? I don't know why it was that day, but I was like, this is it. You're just not going to do it tonight. And I liked that he was out of town, because I just wanted to not have to tell anyone. I knew he'd be supportive, but I just wanted to be alone. I mean, this is part of me being an introvert,
So you knew that he would be supportive, even though, and you shared this in the book, you two were, really good drinkers together. I mean, that's what you did socially together, but you knew he'd be supportive.
Just because he's just really supportive of whatever I want to do. I mean, sometimes, to a fault, but he knew I'd been worried about it for a long time. Okay. And I think in the last year of my drinking, I did so much worrying about my drinking that even the drinking wasn't fun. So I think he probably just thought, and I'm sure there was something in it for him too, like, if she just stops drinking, I won't have to hear about this anymore, And so I knew he wasn't going to be the kind of spouse who said, oh, not even one. Yeah. He'd be great.
But even though he was thinking, do you really have a problem? Like, we drink together, we kind of drink the same amount. So that's awesome. I love that he's so supportive of you. Yeah. And then I also love that. So keep going. Tell us a little bit more. And I want you to lead into what your husband decided to do.
Yeah. Well, so I spent that week, I just got through the first night and, and then I got through the second, and I started to feel better pretty fast. I've read Leslie Jamison's book recently and how much she hated being sober for a while. And that really wasn't me. And I'm so fortunate. But he came home after a week and I said, I'm sober, and he was thrilled. And he kept drinking for a while, but he decided to drink only outside the house. And we'd always done a lot of our drinking at home or out together. So his drinking got curtailed pretty fast. And about 6 months later, he quit entirely. We were actually on our way to a vacation in Sedona, and he said on the plane, I had my last drink last night. And I was like, we're going to a resort where they're going to be handing you alcohol at every month. Are you sure? And he was like, yeah. And so he's now been sober just shy of 5 years. And we look back and we were like, oh my God, we were so codependent. Yeah. We had a really happy marriage. So it wasn't like we were having fights about drinking and stuff, but we had some really good times drinking together that I would not take back for anything, but we were incredibly enmeshed in each other and just we really just couldn't see how much we were drinking. So now we're just like, oh, Jesus.
So how does that work when you quit drinking, your spouse decides to go ahead and quit drinking? When that was a big part of your identity as a couple and the thing that you did together, it was your social time and your time to unwind. How does that then, what do you fill that space with?
Yeah, it was weird at first. I think and I was afraid to, and we still don't go out to eat as much as we used to. I think I thought I was a foodie and I just wanted to drink. I do like food, but I started writing. So, and I think we did probably isolate a little bit together and ourselves at first. He's really into the outdoors. He surfs, he kayaks. We both run, but not together. I think we got more invested in our individual activities, but now I think we just talk a lot more. We like going on sober vacations together. We, both passionate about like our work. And so somehow life just seemed to resettle itself, but it happened organically. It happened over a period of, months or years. And I think part of us getting sober is realizing we don't have to be everything to each other, that it's not realistic. We have a very close marriage. We got married pretty young, late 20s. I mean, that's young these days. We don't have children. So it's always been about just us, John and Kristie, and our dogs, Linus and Ella. And, but the idea that we realize we can be people and we can have some separation as well as togetherness. That's been like the healthiest thing that's come out of our sobriety, I think. And we just get along. I thought we get along then, but we get along much better now. Like, I just think it's super cool.
The authenticity, I think, that the deepness of a connection when there isn't this, it's a drug. Alcohol is a drug. It changes us. It numbs us in ways. It brings out parts of us that aren't maybe really what they, like we pull out parts of ourselves that I think, I look back and I think about what I did when I was drunk and I'm like, people call it truth serum. No, it's not.
No.
I did a bunch of stuff that I really wish, I don't have any regrets, but there are things that I did that, boy, if I could go back, I would not have repeated them.
Oh yeah. Or if you are telling the truth, it's not always skillfully, like you're just blurting something out when maybe it's not the thing to say, or maybe it's not the thing to say then, or.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well said. I want to talk to you a little bit and feel free to share as much or as little as you choose to. You talk about it a bit in the book, your relationship with your parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always been a pretty difficult relationship. They're loving people. They did their very best with me. There's a lot of ways which I had a fantastic upbringing. They launched me into the world, with like a great education and the things I needed. And they taught me to read when I was 2 and all this stuff. But they were difficult people. My father, I think, he's from a family of scientists, very not comfortable sharing his feelings, very silent and kind of absent a lot of the time I was growing up. I mean, he was working. He was, just provide for us, but not around. My mother was very volatile. I think she was depressed. I think she was overwhelmed by having a child. And there was some stuff in my family that just wasn't cool. I think she would lose her temper and she would lash out at me. There was hitting. There was, it was not a safe feeling place. And it's, I always feel the need to say I was not getting burned with cigarettes or anything like that. It was just, but it was not safe. I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel like it was a place where I was loved just for myself. It was pretty conditional. And I never told anyone. So, I mean, I was even they would take me to therapy to find out why I was depressed, and I would lie to the therapist. Because, and it's like, well, why do you think I was depressed? I'm 6 years old and I'm terrified. So I had this sense from a very early age that I just needed to kind of bide my time until I could leave. And it was like, it really embedded in me, like, you're going to leave and then things are going to be better. And I look back now and I wonder, my parents' drinking was what I thought of as normal. And this only came up about a year ago with my therapist. She said, how much do they drink? And I said, well, nothing. Every night they'd have a few, whatever. And she was like, every night they'd have a few, whatever. And I said, well, yeah. Oh, wait, not everybody does that. And so I do think, looking back, like there may have been maybe the same patterns I was playing out. I would say today it's, we have a relationship. I really deeply appreciate them for what they did for me. I think they did what they could. The past is the past, and it was not great. It really wasn't great. And I would say I like to have boundaries now. I think one of the problems between my mom and me is she didn't really understand that we were separate people. there was this sense that I was a reflection of her or something.
Yes. Oh my God. I think that's a really common thing for like my own mother. I think for so many mothers. Yeah. We're just this extension. Like when anything goes wrong, you know, when anything comes up with me, she's like, well, I didn't raise you that way. It's like, I am 45. Like,
right. You're off the hook, lady. You know, like,
good or bad. You don't get to own the good if you don't get to own the bad then. So I don't think you want it all.
Exactly. That's so funny because Jeff Bezos at Amazon always says, like, don't feel so great about yourself if the stock price goes up, unless you also want to feel bad when it goes down. You know,
right.
Same with moms. Yeah. I think she just didn't, and I think she had me fairly young and was at home with me, and I think was just kind of like, well, this is and with my sister, this is my ego extension, and I think I still get that kind of feeling, and I think in some ways it's caused me to maybe be pretty rigid with my boundaries. With family and with other people, because I had to learn how to have them at all. And I'm still learning how to have them be flexible or how to make choices.
Mm-hmm.
So for a while, I think it was kind of like I built like a little moat around myself just to keep everyone away. But I think that I'm actually going to recommend to them that they not read my book, just because I think there's stuff in there. It's not even because it's about them. I think it's just stuff that they probably just don't know about their daughter. They can read it if they want to, but I'm not going to process it with them. If they want to talk about it as a work of literature with me, okay, but I'm not going to go into some sort of big family therapy session because I'm done with that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to talk to them about the sex stuff at all.
Yeah. And there's a fair bit of sex stuff in there. So for someone that wants to, read something salacious, then it's a good read for that too.
Yeah.
Curious if your choice was it a choice for you to not have children? Was that at all related to the way you were raised? Or I'm just curious about that choice. I've chosen as well to not have kids. So I'm curious.
Yeah, I kind of grew up assuming I would have children. In fact, I remember when I was a teenager, I assumed I would have children, but never get married. And I think that was just me being difficult. It was like the young feminist being like, why would I do that? Yeah. And then John and I kind of assumed we'd have kids. And then I think it was partly an unconscious choice. By the time we were in our late 30s, we were like, well, things are pretty good. And I didn't feel a burning desire to have children. And I was working at Amazon, which is hard enough for women, let alone women who are mothers. With the dads there, they usually have, a lot of them have stay-at-home wives, so they have full-time help, basically. It's not help, but it's someone at home. Yeah. So at that point, I just thought, well, why rock the boat if things are going well? But I do think that I would have done anything not to raise my child differently than I was raised, and I think it could have destroyed me. I think I could have sacrificed so much to be a different kind of mom that I didn't want to. I wanted to just be a person first. And would there have been a way to get through that and be a mom and a person? Of course, I see it happen all the time, but yeah. And I really don't, now and then I'll be like, I'll see a cute baby and think, oh, that would be fun. And I'll say to John, look, and he's like, if you really, we could always adopt. And I'm like, no. There's lots of things I want momentarily. And I think sometimes, I regret it when I'm older. And I think, well, I'm going to regret something when I'm older. I regret something now. I'm always going to regret something. So yeah, I think I also wanted my marriage to be really fun. Maybe I was just I'm very fun oriented. Maybe that's why I drank so much for so long.
Yeah, which is funny because I think if we, outside looking in, I think people that don't know you would think you're very serious and very, very professional and, very, fun would not be the word that comes to mind when I think of Kristi Coulter,
exactly.
Even though it's, I know you're an avid reader and you love, the arts and all of that, but fun is not the word.
It's funny. My idea of fun is probably not what a lot of people would think of as fun. I had a friend, I was talking about some movie I loved, and he said, don't you ever just love fun movies? And I was like, to me, this is fun. Like, that's fun. It's like what I call serious fun, because I am a fairly, serious and inward looking person. And the stuff that, like, what people think of as a beach read, like my idea of a beach read is really different. And, but yeah, I love, I remember hearing Jonathan Franzen, who everyone thinks of as super serious, talk about how bewildering he finds that, because he's like, I'm a glutton for pleasure and fun and goofiness. And I'm like, me too. But it's just hard to, convince anyone. But
Maybe
yeah,
not in the conventional sense that the society sees.
Exactly. Right. Like, I don't want to go to, like, the idea of going to like a baseball game. Like, I'm like, please don't make me do that. I really think, please don't can I bring my Kindle or something? But yeah, I love to just goof off and like go to Sephora and, go to movies and just fuck around. And, I love dogs.
Yeah.
I'm fun, damn it.
You are fun, damn it. You have 2 beautiful golden retrievers. Oh my goodness. I've seen pictures, and
those are my children.
they are your children, and they are children. Oh my gosh. Dogs really are. Cats are not quite, they're children too, but they're so much more independent, but dogs really are. I mean, you can't leave them. They are.
Oh, it's insane. And having 2, we really did not understand fully that it's like an exponential, because they have the sibling-like relationship, and it's great. But sometimes we're like, wow, we just really couldn't stop with one, could we? We had to get a little sister. It's just like, they're crazy, but they're so wonderful.
All right. So what's next for Kristi Coulter? What's on the plate now? I think you've got another book in the works.
I do. And I left my job at Amazon about 4 or 5 months ago. I figured 12 years is a really good long run. Yeah. So I've been enjoying just having some time off to do things like go to the grocery store in the middle of the afternoon when it's not crowded.
Isn't it the best feeling?
It's so luxurious. And just write. I mean, launching a book is a big deal. There's a lot of writing that you have to do to get ready for it, to publish things alongside it. Yeah. It's things that I just didn't really understand. And I do have a second book in the works. I can't say what it's about yet, but we're hoping to, get that going. Like, you sell things on proposal, usually with the 50 or 75 pages, and hopefully will happen this fall, I'm hoping. I mean, you never know. It could be like 2 years from now. But so I'm going to write that.
And what I love is that you talked about this in the book, and you've shared it on social media. Your dream from a little girl was to be an author, was to be a writer.
Well, that's the amazing thing, is I wanted this from the time I was 4 years old. I was always writing. I wrote through high school. I won all these awards, got my graduate degree. And then when I wasn't famous, like world famous by the age of 30, I thought, oh, well, I just kind of slunk away. And I really didn't write for another 13 years after that. I mean, I wrote for work, but I just thought it was not going to happen for me. I didn't have the stamina as a young person. And I didn't have like a practice of really writing. I knew how to be talented in short bursts because I had the talent, but I didn't know how to be a worker. And so the fact when I came back to it, I wasn't looking to get published. I just thought, I just want to do this again. And so to be where I am now is utterly, it's still a little bit shocking, honestly, that I can have this career, like this is my first book, and I hope people buy it and read it. But it's like, there will be others. And now I know how to have a job as a writer. Like, I know how to sit down and most days and put in the time and put in the work, and it's really boring a lot of the time. It's a serious drag a lot of the time. Just like meaning,
like the drag of it, meaning you know that every day you have to write 5,000 or however many thousands of words, and even if you don't feel like it, you sit yourself at your computer and you do that work.
I do, and my God, I would love to write 5,000 in a day. On a good day, I get 1,000. I am a writer who I do know people who can write 5,000 a day. They have a tolerance for making it's like a huge mess and then they fix it. I kind of want to like make a mess, but have it at a certain point. It's like my house too. Like, it can be a little bit messy, but not very.
Yes. I totally relate. I just write a blog and I do that too. I'm editing as I go, and everyone's like, never do that. And I'm like, but this is how I do it. I don't know.
Yeah, I have to. I used to edit obsessively as I went. And I remember thinking like, you can't just keep going back to the beginning. You will never progress. And so now I'm willing to have some mess, but yeah, I think 5, I'm still learning. Like, I have my friend Claire Dieterer, who's a brilliant writer. She said something recently, like, I'm going to have to start working weekends if I'm going to get my book in on time. And I was like, oh, you take weekends off? And she said, well, yeah. And I thought, oh, and she's a full-time writer. And so the idea that I don't have to do this every day occurred to me. Like, sometimes you can just go to the movies or work in the yard or something. But I do try to sit down for, I think I've got at most like 3 or 4 good hours a day. Yeah. And I try to just trudge forward. And sometimes, like with any job, it's fun and it doesn't feel like work. And sometimes it's just like, oh, this is a nightmare.
But don't you find that like 3 to 4 hours of you putting in work writing? I mean, I don't know about at Amazon. I know that it, serious deadlines and everything else going on, but I've worked in corporate, in the corporate world as well. And it's like, I've never worked harder than like really what I was doing working in an office. I was not always working all the time.
No, I mean, even at Amazon, I would think back when I think of like time, either working with the people who work for me to enable them, because management's work, or doing my own work at my desk. I mean, yeah, I was lucky if I had 3 hours of that a day, and it's meetings and talking to someone in the hallway or going to get coffee. Yeah, I mean, 3 to 4 hours, that's work. I think I read a stat somewhere that the average office worker actually gets like 2 hours of work done a day. It's nothing.
I totally believe that. I totally believe that.
And it's your brain too. It's not just the schedule. It's like, I have all day. I can't focus like that for 8 hours.
No. And I was going to say, I feel like going to the movies or, going for a run or going grocery shopping or whatever in the day is sometimes exactly what you need to then sort of recharge so that you can come back to your computer fresh, or maybe there's an experience that happens exactly as it should. And you can go back and relate it in some way to your work.
I triangulate that way. I'll be going for a run and I'll think of something that I'm like, oh yes, like I have to kind of shake my brain loose. And going to movies and reading books and seeing music, like art. Yeah, I think it's really important if you're a writer. First of all, you have to be reading, but I think you have to be consuming a lot of different kinds of art, because that's how you get ideas, and that's how you get inspired by other people, or you want to respond to something that they did in their art. And so I try to curate my inputs, but because there's so many that I could take in, but it's critical to me. And just random things I see on the street, often I'm like, aha, that's just like the problem I'm having in my writing. And then I go back to it.
Yeah, well done. What great advice. I'm curious for people that are watching that might be thinking that they want to write their own memoir, because I know a lot of people are looking to do it. And I've shared that I've written a book and I self-published. I knew that I wasn't going to be, I don't have a name. I don't have a history with writing. It was for me just a chance to sort of share something of me and hopefully help a few other people that wanted to read the book. And I'm excited to see where it's gone. But for those that want to go ahead and write, what other advice do you have for them to get started?
I would say writing is never a bad idea. I write primarily to know what I think. Because
I sometimes don't know what I think until I write it down.
Yeah, that's how I process information. I think it's how my brain works. And so I write, or I'll think I'm writing an essay about something, and I sit down and I'm like, oh, I didn't have any idea what I was writing about. So I never think it's a bad idea. I think a blog, like I started, writing, I started my blog Off Dry just to communicate with other sober people because they'd help me. And I say the main thing about writing is you can't write with an eye toward publishing. You can't censor yourself. I don't think about who I might hurt with what I'm saying when I'm writing my first draft. Now, later on, I do have like ethics I follow about whose story I'm telling. And of course you anonymize and things like that. But I've known writers who say, well, I asked my mom if I could write about her and she didn't want me to. I'm like, why would you do that? You have to be ruthless. Tell your own story and think about that stuff later and just get it out. And then you can think about whether you want to publicize it. You don't have to. Maybe it's just for you, or how to do it. I started my blog anonymously. There was like, I said I'm a 40-something woman living in the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't like some genderless, nameless being, but I didn't tell anyone who I was. Just do it, or look in your community, look for classes at community colleges or workshops. In any big city will have like a writer's center, like we have Hugo House here in Seattle. Go and take a workshop with someone, meet other writers, join a writing group. Read a ton. And when you love something, try to figure out what it is about it and find your voice, and don't try to sound like anyone else. And that sounds like it's such an easy thing to say, and it's the hardest thing. I mean, I've been writing for 44 years. With a 13-year gap. and finding a voice is really, really tough. But do it. It's good for you to write.
Honestly, it's therapy, really. It's just journaling on a computer or however.
Yeah, whatever you want to do. Write poems, write whatever you want, And then with the publishing world is very tough. I was lucky in a lot of ways. There's always an amount of luck. I'm not saying my book wasn't worthy, but there's a lot of worthy books that don't get that attention. And self-publishing has become, a real route for people to get to the right audience, especially if you're writing about something that's like a niche topic. Yeah. It's a way for you to get to, not 400,000 people, but like the 10,000 people who really want to hear your story. So I never think it's a bad idea. The world's really changed since I was in grad school, and that was called vanity publishing. And you never did it, ever. And now some people are like, they just rather go that route. You keep control. Yeah. When you're published by a traditional publisher like I am, they've been amazing to work with, but it's their business. Yeah. Ultimately, like they control the marketing and the PR and things like that. And I don't want to control those things. I want to do the writing, but for people who are used to being their own bosses, it can be more satisfying to self-publish, I think.
I thought it was cool in your book. I think it's even in the acknowledgments, or maybe it is in one of the chapters, you'll tell me, but where you actually went to a writing workshop, and you'd been a writer for so long, but you learned so much about finding your voice and not writing things in a way that we would already be able to process it, so that we would, as the consumer, say, oh yeah, I understand that. And we'd be putting our own perspective on it. It was really interesting to know that you're always honing your craft. And I think that's a big part of this work as well. And there's something to be said for the person who just wants to get their message out there, even if it's just for themselves or for their family or for their kids or to leave a legacy. But then to be a real writer, to really get it out there and to really potentially be picked up by an agent and a publisher, you really need to kind of learn the nuances.
Absolutely. I'm always a student. I'm going to the Port Townsend Writing Conference next week, and I'll be in a class 3 or 4 hours a day. I mean, constantly. And it's just fun for me. It's fun to just look at new ways. Listening to Melissa Febos, who's a great author who's sober, listening to her talk about ways she approaches tense, the use of past tense and present tense in memoir a few months ago, I was just like, oh my God, like it lit, because I have this foundation of skill and I know what I'm doing, but I was like, that opened up whole new ways for me to think. And so, you just never stop learning. Or even when you're teaching, you're learning, you're looking at other people's work. It's fun. I think it's just super fun.
Well, I think it's very obvious that this is exactly what you were born to do. Kristi Coulter, you are a writer, you are an author, you're an incredible author of the amazing book, Nothing Good Can Come From This. It's going to be available August 8th, I believe? 7th.
Yeah.
Coming a month away. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I'm Audible too. I did the audiobook myself. Yes. I recorded it. So if you liked hearing my voice, you can hear a lot more of it.
Awesome. Well done. I would love to, well, first of all, tell us where can people, are you still writing for the Off Dry? Are you still writing your blog?
I am. It's kind of irregular these days just because life has gotten so busy, but I do post there when I feel like I have something to say. There will also be I'll have some new work coming out a couple places closer to when the book comes out that I will publicize heavily on social media. I never want to say where, just because you never know then until it actually happens. And there will be some excerpts coming out in some interesting places. And so I think right now it's the book and that stuff. And then hopefully the new book, publishing takes forever is something people don't realize. So I finished this book a year ago. And then it's the publisher's job getting it ready and all that stuff. So like, there won't be another book for me till probably 2 years. I mean, 2 years, wildly optimistic.
But we get it. And you still and you haven't finished writing it yet, right?
Oh no! Yeah. Oh no! But I do still blog sometimes, and I'm always looking for ways to write short pieces and get them out there. In addition to like book work, which is my main thing. I'm not a freelancer. I'm not like looking to make money off like writing every day, because that way I would never get my book written. Right now I'm just living off savings. But yeah, so I will be around. Yeah,
you will be around. So where are the best places for people to find you?
I think definitely on offdry.com, my blog. I'm very active on Facebook, so you can always follow me there. I use it it's just a great platform for me, and I use it kind of as a lab to try out ideas. I think there's a lot of things I've talked about there that end up in my work somewhere.
Oh, they do. Your posts are always, every single one of them, I either laugh or I think something about it or I feel a certain way. Your writing is just, it's just so interesting and juicy and it's filled with so much emotion. And I enjoy your writing so much. And I'm so proud of the work that you're doing, because you really have found your calling. This is exactly what you were put on the earth to do. And I admire you so much, Kristie, for honoring that and for risking it, you know, for really doing the scary work of jumping into sort of the unknown. I mean, you had this great gig going at Amazon and you let that go and you're living on savings to write a second book. Like what? It's really exciting. You're a real shero for so many of us. I have a couple of last questions that I would love to ask you. You mentioned a couple of your tools. I know running is a big tool for you in your sobriety, but what are some of the other tools that you really like to go to in your recovery?
I think that writing is actually one of them because it is something that keeps me so grounded. Getting enough sleep is kind of a big deal. And I don't always do it. I'm not always great with it, but it's huge. I mean, just being rested and talking to people. I'm not in AA, but I have found that I think the core of AA is that it's one alcoholic talking to another. And I have found that talking to other people who are sober is just huge. Like you just get each other immediately. And it's actually made my relationships with non-sober people a lot more authentic too, because I'm just like, I just get right to it now. I think those are probably the big ones. I have like a really half-assed meditation habit. Like that's probably the next thing for me. I like it and then I just never do it, you know?
It feels so good, but I just don't have time to do that. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And then 3 weeks later, I'm like, oh, and I even have Headspace like sending me reminders and I'm like, whatever. I just don't want to do that, but it's great. But yeah, I think that exercise really, and I was a big exerciser before too, but running and just physical activity, that's huge. I mean, if you can just get your body moving, it just, I think, in whatever you want to do, walk or swim or anything, it just really, when you're very newly sober, it tires you out, which is good. It's like tiring out a toddler or a dog. I just was like, I want to exhaust myself, so I'm tired and I go to sleep. But yeah, those are probably my big tools: just communicating, reading, writing, and having fun and like being nice to myself and doing nice things for myself.
I love that. I saw you recently. You bought yourself flowers, and I thought that's
exactly
what we need to be doing. Yeah, and I was going to say about the running. For people watching right now, don't think that Kristie is all excited every single time she puts on her running shoes and goes out the door. Like you hate it most of the time, don't you?
Does anyone, it's like, it's hard. And I'm not like some great runner either. I mean, I'm just sort of plodding along. But it's like, I rarely regret having gone for a run. It's like, I don't always enjoy writing, but I rarely regret having written. Yes. So you get out there and it's like, yeah, you just do it. It took me years to like running. I don't know why I kept it up. I really don't. I could have done a lot of things, but I kept doing it. And now I like it. I beat myself into liking it.
I know. And I wonder if maybe it's the writer in you because it's that methodical, that motion. I don't know. Cause I'm not a runner. I'm not
better. It's, it's a skill. I like the idea that it was something I sucked at. And I'm mediocre at best. This is not false modesty, but it's a skill that you just learn. And you learn that all kinds of people run. You go to a half marathon in a big city and the range of body types is astonishing and ages. This idea that you've got to be like this tiny little wiry person, those are the people who win. Most of us genetically will never, like our bones aren't that, like it's amazing to see like the variety of people who come out. It makes you realize this is just a thing that anyone can do. And you don't have to be like, what is good? You don't have to be good at it, which is good because I'm not. Trying to make it feel better.
Yeah, for sure. And what's so cool about running, and again, I'm not somebody who runs. My partner's just kind of getting into it. He's getting up where he's running now 20 minutes. Like he'll sprint a few minutes and then he'll sort of jog for a few. And he's really trying to improve on that. And I just think that anybody can grab a pair of running shoes and just either go outside or on a treadmill or something. Like it's no equipment required. Like you don't have to overthink it. You don't have time to even overthink it. It's just for anyone watching right now, if you are looking for something, even just put on those shoes and get out the door, go walking. It's such a great way to help your body, mind, and spirit all at the same time.
That's why I started, because I was traveling for work a lot. And I did a ton of yoga for a decade. And I'd like to be doing more of that now, but I didn't have to show up at a certain time to run. I could just have my shoes and go. I've run in some of the great cities in the world, and you can just, you just go out for 5 minutes and if you have 10 minutes, then turn around and come back. Like it doesn't take a certain amount of time. All you need are shoes, but do go get good shoes. Don't just put on whatever.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. You know that I work in the health and wellness space, and I work with a podorthist who I interviewed him for my blog, and the biggest advice that he gave me, I was not a runner, so I was never buying running shoes. And I went to see him because I was having a knee issue. And my doctor said, oh, go see Ryan Grant. He's great. He'll figure out what's going on with your foot, your knee, your feet and your knees and everything. So I went there and he analyzed my gait and he said, okay, so you should be in a neutral running shoe. And I'm like, yeah, but I don't
What
run.
is that?
So I'll buy a walking shoe. Like what, I barely walk, but what should, because I worked out at the gym, but I was not something. And he says, no, like everybody should be in a really good pair of running shoes, just
really matters.
For even just day to day going to the grocery store, and
Right.
And it was sort of this revelation, which sounds silly, but it really was a revelation to me to buy running shoes. I just never felt like someone like me who didn't run belonged at a running shoe store or in the running shoe section.
Yeah, for anything, and just go and just tell them, and they'll watch you. They'll make you get on a treadmill. It's kind of embarrassing, but they're just looking to see if like your feet turn in or turn out, and then they'll just be like, "There's basically like 3 kinds of running shoes with different kinds of cushioning. They'll give you the right one, and you will feel better."
Yes, and what Kristie's saying is, if your feet turn in or turn out, there are running shoes that will correct that, so that you're now even just wearing them to walk around. You're walking around the world better in your running shoes, and then of course, if you do choose to jog or run, you are not going to injure your joints. So, absolutely awesome advice. I love that. Thank you so much. I'm going to end this on my very favorite question, who I borrow it from Oprah. Kristi Coulter. What do you know for sure?
Oh, wow. I know for sure that I cannot have this life if I drink. Not drinking is not the only thing I have to do to have this life, but it's really baseline. And I know that getting sober is the thing that unlocked the entire world to me. I had an okay life before, but that's another thing, is I know that I don't know how much goodness is ahead of me, because at every point in my life I thought, well, this is about as good as it's going to get. And then, I do something, or just the world opens up and I move forward into something better, which is a good reminder to me right now, because I'm in this fear period before publishing a book. Like, everyone thinks you should be happy. No, it's like, except other writers are like, no, you should be in a meltdown, and so I've been saying, okay, this is as good as it gets. It's great. But it's like, I also don't know like what it might be about to happen. And so I encourage people, if you're thinking, well, my drinking's okay, or I don't know, it's too scary, just know that you could be unlocking a lot inside yourself if you were able to step away from it. And you have nothing to lose by trying. It's an experiment. All of life is an experiment. So I guess those are the things I know for sure. Yeah. And I like lipstick a lot. I know that for sure.
Kristi Coulter, this has truly been one of my very favorite conversations of all time. Thank you so, so much for sharing with all of us today. You are amazing. For anybody watching after August 7th, you are just going to hit any of the bookstores or online to order. Nothing good can come from this. You will not regret it. It is a fantastic read. Kristi Coulter, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah.
To get access to all of the free videos and interviews, visit sobrietystartshere.com.